Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever it is in this beautiful world. We've got an international call going today. We got Scott, you're in Montreal,
Yes,
and we
sir.
got Paul Alford, our host, and he's in Britain. And of course, we got Boris, and he's in that little bitty, awful little city called Gay Paris. So, and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So this is great, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to get to talk to some really innovative people about innovative technology and solution resolution. And so, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce everybody and lead this into a disaster zone so we can talk about real stuff.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim. So it's great for me to be able to present today. I've been thrown into this a bit at the last minute, but we won't worry about that. We won't dwell on that. I'm particularly interested in this subject because, as I see it, I've got lots of customers. A lot of them are announcing they have a cloud-first strategy. They're going to lose skilled people. They're going to be moving a lot of their infrastructure off-site. But there's still going to be that network component that connects the user to the SaaS, the software as a service, or to the cloud solution. So I'd like to start off with Scott. Scott, what do you see the challenges going forward with network performance monitoring and problem determination?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of customer conversations just like you have about that subject, and it's a much more complicated problem than it actually looks like on the surface. I think a lot of people think SaaS applications are a website somewhere they connect to, and if things aren't working, that the network is usually to blame. And we know from some pretty well-studied statistics from companies like IDC that network's really to blame only about half the time. So if you're trying to figure out what to do when you have your users screaming at you because their Salesforce isn't working, there could be many, many reasons why that's happening, and the network is one of them. So you want to at least absolve the network or figure out what it is, where to go next. If it's actually your SaaS provider or something even deeper than that, or even the client's computer, you got to figure that out pretty quickly, or else you're going to end up hunting for a needle in the haystack. And that could get kind of painful.
Very painful.
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with that. I think obviously Salesforce is often cited as the example, but the one I think that's the killer for most of our customers is Office 365.
Yeah.
And that's certainly presenting some challenges, and we see quite big variation in performance in different sites. I don't think I'm not laying the blame at Microsoft's door because I'm not sure that's always true. But it strikes me that is the sort of thing that we're going to have to tackle from the user end. So yeah. What sort of tooling can you put in place to monitor that type of activity?
Hey, Boris, you want to take it?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, the rationale in having, also Accedian and Performance Vision joining forces. I think when you actually move to the cloud, you move to an environment which is a lot more complex, with bits that you actually control and bits that you do not control. And you really have to understand not only the underlying network connections that are used, but also what's happening on the end user's end and on the server end, and combining active and passive methods in terms of analyzing how the network is performing and how applications are performing makes a lot of sense to basically keep a clear picture of what's happening and what experience users are having. So that would be my answer in terms of combining really active testing to know how you're connected to the cloud and how you're connected to different locations where you've got users, and combining also passive to understand exactly what users are doing to your on-prem data centers and to the cloud applications, and keep visibility on what their end user experience is through time.
Sure.
I was say one thing we didn't talk about real quick. We wanted to announce is that Performance Vision has been a sponsor of Love My Tool for 3 years now, I believe, or 4. And then just this, I guess it was just at the end of last year, they joined a really cool company called Accedian, who's been around taking care of large corporations, service providers, and now they're merging those two technologies to come up with an incredible visibility tool for anybody that has almost any company of reasonable size. Isn't that right, Boris or Scott, whoever wants to take that.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the combination of the two companies really provide a coverage of two very different markets, which is the service provider market on one end and the enterprise market on the two ends, and also technological combination of capabilities from the active side and from the passive side, from really the network layers and the extension to the application layer visibility.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that we were looking for a company to complement us at Accedian. We went through about 70 different companies globally, and our criteria was to find something that was completely virtualized, very, very lightweight, and could scale down to the smallest company's needs in terms of monitoring visibility at the application and the network layer, but also scale it up to the largest banks in the world, or the carriers themselves, who need to have their own IT infrastructure that dwarfs a lot of an enterprises. So that was kind of the motivation there, is to bring that technology excellence on board. And actually, the exciting part is, like Boris is referring to, is the ability to take some of the key components that we have at Accedian and integrate them. So one of the example of that would be analytics, machine learning, automated root cause analysis. Things can help the busiest IT operations guy know where to look first in a pile of data, and that's kind of becoming the new norm. And I think if you look at SaaS applications, just knowing where to start, where to take out your high resolution tools is probably the biggest challenge.
Well, that's like, the old adage is, you're trying to find that needle in a haystack. You've got a problem. You're just not sure which haystack it's in. And with that deep visibility capability, you guys have really got, a pretty widespread application or capability for visibility.
I think it'd be great if you could, Boris, you want to try to give an example of like how a problem might surface, right? And the steps you would take to try to figure out where to isolate it, because there's a lot of customers we work with that have these problems.
Yeah, so take one problem and I'll make the answer. But basically, when we look at resolution processes, in most companies, they start with end users actually raising a flag to the help desk and saying something is slow. Unfortunately, very few customers are actually proactive enough and having sufficient visibility to know about degradations before end users actually report them. So the process normally start like that, and then they move to a place where intermittent degradations and performance degradations are very hard to materialize and understand exactly where they come from and which team should direct them. So the process would normally be to broadcast, the problem across multiple groups. That could be network people, that could be data center people, that could be cloud people, application people, to look into their own tooling and actually figure out where problems come from. And that's where the process, goes normally wrong in terms of losing time, in terms of focusing, on showing mean time, what we call mean time to innocence, instead of actually having a positive indication of where problems are coming from and directing a case directly to the right team with sufficient evidence of where it comes from and when it happens.
Yeah, this is a vendor management problem too, right? Because you're talking about SaaS. The right person to target might actually be the SaaS vendor itself to take action. If you can figure out their servers are slow, or they're not responding properly, or they're intermittent, right? That's important too, to manage your vendors.
Yeah, and SaaS actually, people see it very often. They see cloud as a simplification. In the end, when you look at the end result, it's not a simplification, because not everything is brought to the cloud. So you've got a mix of on-premise, you've got a mix of private cloud, you've got a mix of SaaS, you've got a mix of public cloud. And why it brings more complexity is that it means a lot more vendors to actually manage, and a lot more things to manage where you lack visibility, where you have absolutely no way to control what's happening, where you don't have access to the network. It also means a lot more a dependency map between the different systems, which is going to get a lot more complex, because you basically build links between your legacy applications and your SaaS applications and your cloud-hosted applications. And the overall end picture is really a lot more messy than the start point in the end.
Yeah, it's not just a URL in your web browser anymore. I mean, that's it's actually just fascinating to use the TCP analysis tools that we have, and you can really see through the thread. And actually, Office 365 is a good example of that as well, because there's a lot of third-party components that can plug into it and integrate with it. And the end user experience might appear to be related to Microsoft, but like you said there, Paul, probably can't blame them that easily. If there's third-party components that are being integrated, they might be the parts that are slowing down the page loads. And that's very important to know exactly where the source is, or else you're going to be talking to the wrong guy, and your customer's sitting there waiting for you, right? So, messy stuff.
I mean, the complexity of some of the environments in large corporations anyway is astounding, quite honestly. If I think of one of our customers, they're quite a large insurance company. They use Office 365. If you go from a user's desktop, you'll go from a thin client through the LAN infrastructure at the remote office, across a private wide area network, into the data center, into a Zen app server or Zen desktop, out of that, through a proxy, into the internet, across to the Microsoft data center. You think of all those different pieces. That's it's not surprising that people are struggling to maintain the performance of their solutions. Quite honestly.
Tell us, Paul, how many people are involved in managing that kind of?
In this customer, there's probably 4 or 5 different service providers in that end-to-end chain, and so not only are you having to figure out which component it is, you need to get down to that level. Otherwise, how do you know who you should be engaging with?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the hard part. I think we probably expect that 90% of problem resolution time is trying to pinpoint where to start working. After that, people are usually pretty effective at getting the job done.
Yeah.
We have a lot of smart guys in the community that can solve any problem if you give it to them in a well-posed question. Right?
Yeah.
Just, if you're wandering around looking for stuff, it's more like a minefield, and that's pretty hard to get where you need to go. So I think that's really where we try to help focus, is bring a wide-angle view into the infrastructure that of course today is probably increasingly like 90% plus hybrid cloud or SaaS oriented, right? And that's these mixed application environments are a little tricky for a guy carrying Wireshark around. I mean, it's just not the right place to start. Sometimes it's usually the right place to finish, but you have to get to know where to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. So it seems to me, if just digging under the covers a bit and thinking about the technical aspects of this, it seems to me that not only are there more opportunities coming up for NPM and NPMD type solutions, but there's also more challenges. So some of the things I thought about were, obviously the pervasive use of encryption. And in particular, I was talking actually a few years ago at Sharkfest to Nalini Elkins, who Tim knows very well. And she's got concerns over TLS 1.3. But also when I was talking to her, she said, of course, we could be heading for a situation where if we deploy IPv6 everywhere, maybe we'll just have IPsec tunnels going from one host to another. So what are we going to do about that? And I think that's a very good point. So how do you see this playing out?
Well, I think you've got different ways to approach that problem. Encryption is definitely going to be more generalized than ever, and the use of it is going to increase. Probably more, on the front servers and not so much in the data center due to the CPU consumption it represents, because people will probably try to make some saving into that. But definitely the north-south traffic will be mostly encrypted. If we think about the east-west traffic, the challenge will be more on how to capture it in the new environments, and I think we've got keys for that. So you've got different approaches. I mean, one approach is to decrypt it with the private key, and that's what we did in the past, and that was embedded. This was fine, but it doesn't work anymore with TLS 1.3 or Diffie-Hellman type algorithm.
Yeah.
What can you do beyond that? I mean, you can recognize the traffic, and you can still do a lot of troubleshooting through TCP analysis. So I start by that because it's basic. But basically, if you've got a very powerful TCP analysis solution, you can get a lot of job done through that first level of analysis in terms of pointing out where your problem is appearing for which users, where it comes from. If it comes from the TLS layer, or if it comes from the network layer, or if it comes from the server processing layer. And then, obviously, the encryption problem is not only impacting performance measurement, it's also impacting security. And I guess while a lot of flows are going to be encrypted, companies will have to implement also SSL inspection, capabilities to maintain their network safe and make sure that there is no critical data going out of their network without knowledge from them. And I guess that's a thing we already implemented. We made a webinar about that actually yesterday. We can bring visibility into SaaS and cloud services basically by joining SSL inspection capabilities and passive network monitoring. And that's what we did. And then you basically gain back visibility into the transaction layer, and you're able to tell inside your Office 365 exactly what function is not responding as expected.
I think that type of capability is going to be important, because one of the issues that we've noticed is if you look at notification mechanisms working across the internet, of course, a lot of them work on a long pole type basis. And if everything's encrypted, how the heck do you know the difference between a long pole and a slow response time? So is that something that has troubled you and you've had to deal with, or am I just being stupid?
No. We got requests in that direction, and that actually triggered, all the investigation we made and what we presented actually yesterday in terms of that combination, of SSL inspection and fast-speed wire data. And I think that's going to be, a very common solution to implement in a very short time frame.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, this is also an area where synthetic testing becomes useful, right? So you can get a certain level of information from either passive or active tests, but the combination gives a better picture. And one thing we've seen is quite interesting is you can create synthetic testing, and you can actually capture that with your passive monitoring solution, your wire data analytics solution. So you actually see how the synthetic tests are behaving as well as the encrypted ones. And that gives you a little bit better feel, because you're going to the same destinations from the same location. And it gives you sort of a tracer that gives you just a bit more information. But I'd say that in 90% of the customer cases, enterprise IT, the passive and wire analytics is really still the core insight tool. It just has to adapt to these new environments.
Yeah, sure. No,
I bounce on that. You were mentioning, for example, microservices and encrypted communications between containers. That's another example that we'll address very soon by actually placing, capture capabilities inside the host that contains, or basically that hosts the different containers. I think in the world and with the complexity we're reaching, there is no way relying on a single method to actually capture traffic either on physical networks or only passive and not active. Not placing anything on system will be enough. So you probably have to mobilize several ways to actually gather performance information to get a clear picture. And I think the whole point into that will be how you maintain and you actually group that information and make it readable to human beings for diagnostics, which will be the key to being successful. And I think that's the direction we're taking with Accedian.
Yeah, actually, you don't even want to communicate with other people sometimes, right? Like, one of the most important things I think that I've seen the team in Paris coming up with in the products recently was a very elegant query language that can be applied to an API. So you can stream out data that's exactly what other systems are looking for without the human being in the middle, right? So let's say you have an intrusion detection system and you want to use your wire data to pass certain anomalies onto them. That's actually really important, is that you don't want to get into a swivel chair situation that's even worse than before. You want these systems to be able to talk to each other at the long range, right, while giving humans the guidance of where to look. And that's ultimately where all the research is probably going in passive monitoring these days.
Right.
Sorry, I was going to ask: Is there any industry standardization going on? I don't know anything about this, but are there groups of manufacturers of these types of tools that are looking at standard protocol formats and message formats?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, the API side, right? I mean, most people are falling on REST API and XML, and it's fairly straightforward in terms of that. And you have the open source community, the queuing systems like Kafka, are starting to be more widely adopted at real time. But I guess, Boris, what do you think about the interaction? Is there actually a difficulty of interaction between systems at this point, or is it pretty fluid?
Well, I think if you provide, an open API with a query language which is easy and natural for people to use, you probably make the integration a lot easier. I think it's not so much on standardizing; it's on making something which is both robust, scalable, and easy to implement, which is the key for that. And I guess the second point, and that's a point where we actually focus a lot of our attention, is that we need to move from a model where we collected a lot of data. First it was packets, and then it was metadata to make the data already with the first level of computation and easier to interpret with large volumes. I think the next step is really in automating, diagnosing and enriching automatically the data set with automated baselining and predictions built by artificial intelligence capabilities. So that's really what we're working on.
Okay, that sounds exciting. Yeah, that sounds really good. One of the points I wanted to talk about was coverage. And we've spoken about this with other people who've been on the show to talk about visibility products. Of course, one of the challenges is that you've got now systems that have got, say, 50 microservices running in individual containers. And then we've got stuff, as you pointed out, hybrid cloud, where we've got on-premise components and stuff in the cloud, etc. Are you saying that, do you really believe that we need to absolutely blanket cover all of these, or are we moving more towards a sort of rapid deployment on need type of model?
Well, I think you need to have the two capabilities. I think the one key thing is that you need with a single solution to cover the different layers of that. So you need to cover your physical network, but obviously inside your on-prem architecture, you've got cloud and you've got virtual environments where you need to actually have coverage. And the same will apply to the public cloud. And the key point will be in carrying back, the whole set of data into one place to be able to follow things, because the barrier between public and private cloud will just disappear soon. So unless you've got coverage of the two sides, you won't have a clear picture of things. And then the thing which I think your questions takes me to is that you have to have the ability with the solution to where it needs to be. So to me, it makes no sense like building a visibility solution and thinking, of an investment cycle of 3 years and saying this is going to be it for 3 years. You need to maybe cover that part for 1 month. That automation will multiply the number of servers for a given period of time, and then they will disappear. Your solution for visibility needs to have exactly the same kind of flexibility. Otherwise, it won't basically provide you with the right visibility for that new age.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's also it depends on the use case, Paul. We see some startup companies trying to do like monitoring the actual how containers are surviving and the microservices are spawning and all that kind of thing. But for the average problem that a user is experiencing, that's a different level of detail, right? That's kind of getting down into the coding side, the deployment side, Kubernetes, all these great things. But the basic problem that enterprises are facing, I'm sure you can agree with that, is that you still have to solve the problem, the root cause, and get an understanding where the problem originates quickly. So there's only a certain level of depth you have to go into to get that information. It'd be good to know if it was coming from a container infrastructure, but after that, you might want to pass that to somebody in the application team.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's always been the big problem, is recognition. I've got a problem, and then, determine where it's at, and then, try to find a resolution. We've been fighting this issue since forever.
Forever.
And because all the way back into the 70s when we built the first data scopes, it was, we could see we had a problem. First off, they had to be able to recognize it was a problem. It didn't reach out and slap them and say, hey, I got a problem. And then someone had to interpret that. And then someone had to say, oh, this is broken, and it really hasn't changed. But now with the ability to dichotomize a network and services and elements of the network, this is really moving in the direction we got to move, or it's just not going to work. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to see IPv6 deployed. It's only 27 years old now, 23 years old. So
what happened to IPv5? I mean, that was a good one too.
Well, the NG, that was NG that we worked on. But, NG was if we had deployed NG back then, IPv6 would be just a walk in the park. But just recently, the ITU estimated that it would cost something like $5.8 trillion to mandate IPv6 movement, and I don't think the world's going to absorb.
I don't think we're getting a cut of this, are we?
No, I wish we would.
That's a chunk of money.
Let's figure out a way to do that in Bitcoins, gang. Okay, we'll all be right.
Yeah, we can order pizza.
Yeah, and I was just going to say before we ended here that this merger or partnership with Performance Vision and Accedian, both of these companies have great capabilities. And I'm looking forward to seeing more and hearing more from you guys. This is really, in my humble estimation, a movement in the right direction.
Hey, yeah, you guys got to stay tuned. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun. And the advantage we're at as two companies, we're both working off single code basis, right? We're not like bolting together 20 different products and modules and things and acquiring companies and trying to accumulate it. Our products work great together and are complementary. So I think we're gonna have a lot of velocity and some cool new features coming out as the year goes on. So it's worth watching. I think we're both excited to be part of one force to be reckoned with.
And I notice you've made it into the Gartner Magic Quadrant, which is that a milestone?
It's a great milestone, yeah, because I think it's actually a testament to Performance Vision that made the application. And if you look at what the guys at Gartner called out, right, they're saying basically the advantages of that solution are seeing into the SDN environment, seeing into SaaS, virtualized environments, and it's all the gaps that guys have with their traditional stream to disk solutions. So that's really that's exciting. I think we have a ways to go with Gartner. Interestingly, a lot of their recommendations for our product are ones we're already releasing in the next few weeks and over the rest of the year. So it's kind of cool that we see that we're in alignment with their vision.
Yeah, I think, in fact, I've got the report up on the other screen on the other side of my office. So I'm just looking at it. Yeah, I think it struck me that, they always do this pros and cons type thing. And the downside stuff all seems to be stuff that you could quite easily address, particularly now as a joint organization, because they're talking about geographic coverage and things like that. So
the ability to execute was difficult. I mean, for guys in Paris, they're a smaller team, but for Accedian, we got 300 developers and we're globally positioned.
Yeah,
and that's a great fit. I mean, the nice thing is working in Montreal, where the head office is, we also speak French, right? And so these teams are culturally having a good time, getting some pain relief, right, of getting some help to get some cool features done. I think so far we haven't broken them too bad. Hey, Boris?
Oh, no, definitely. We feel that PV is now on steroids, basically. That's the
cool. Steroids it is.
And Boris did most of this over the weekend. So what else did you ask for?
Absolutely. That's what steroids can do for you.
That's right, man.
Okay, well, I think I've known Boris a few years. We've bumped into each other at a few trade shows occasionally, and it's great to see the success that you've had, Boris, and congratulations in the merger. I think that's great. I think it's time we wrapped up, I'm afraid, Tim. I think what we have to do is get these guys back again.
Absolutely.
I think you agree.
Fun guys you have here.
Just got to convince them to show up, and it's hard to get them because they're, like I said, we're in 3 time zones. So so we'll be ready next time. We won't be using an Apple computer.
Internet's always open. We're there.
Okay, well, I'd like to just poll round the panel just for closing remarks. Boris, tell us in a nutshell the future of NPMD and how you see it going forward.
Well, to me, NPMD is going to just move to the network as we knew it, to a lot of new environments, and merging with the system, which in the end makes sense. I mean, that's a global industry trend, and that finally applies to NPMD, and that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Scott, in wider in the Accedian product set, what's the fit for performance vision?
Well, actually, one of the things Accedian's done over the years, we've been working with a lot of the leading mobile operators, guys like SK Telecom, SoftBank, Japan, Verizon, and so on. It's really about automating their networks so they get to the point where you get a nervous system that sees how the users are behaving, how their service quality is, what their performance is, and then it automatically adjusts that using SDN. And I think in the data center complexity that's out there in the enterprise space, moving more towards SD-WAN and other intent-based networking, the ultimate future of our company together is going to be to create the richest source of feedback for both troubleshooting, monitoring, but also as direct input into these automated systems. And that's kind of the journey that's going to be important, right? We're not going to be working at human speed in 10 years from now. So how do we get this information into the machines that'll let us all go and retire?
Okay. And you got those magic words in there of artificial intelligence, so that's got to be good. It's a shame you didn't slip in blockchain as well, but
I could, yeah.
Off of that one.
I thought the magic word was retirement. I didn't think the magic word was blockchain. Anyway,
Tim, final words of wisdom, Tim.
I just think I've seen this industry go for a long time from where it started, and this is one big step we've been needing to take. And as we move virtual and we move out to all these different deployment methodologies, it's an essential that we have visibility. Of course, I'm considered the TAP guy anyway, and it's not just TAPs; it's about visibility. You know, and all we need to do is get it to the point to where everybody can deploy it. It's reasonably cost. I do not think we're going to lose human beings. I don't think we're going to see robots taking over anytime soon. I don't care what anybody says. I've never been able to figure out a way to do things without people. So, but I think it's great. These are two good companies, rock solid technology, and I can't wait to see what Boris does next weekend. I'm really excited about getting you guys together. This is great fun, and we're going to do it again. We're going to keep talking about this because this is essential. Now, Scott, if they want to come and talk to you guys or get more information, they just go to Accedian.com, right? Or do they go to performancevision.com, or either one or both?
Either one's good. Yeah, no, we're keeping it all alive for a little bit longer. There's a lot of people who know Performance Vision, especially in Europe, and we'll keep that brand alive for a little while. Okay. So either or is good, and so we can take your call on either side of the Atlantic. And if you guys, anybody out there is actually at Interop next week, we're flying Boris over to Las Vegas. So that's what he's doing with this weekend, if you're interested.
I hope he's going to be writing code, not gambling.
Yeah, right. Keep him off the slot machines.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in a casino before, so I'll keep an eye on him.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much for your time, everyone. And we'll catch you on LMTV next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Paul.